Hi, this is Dan Albaum. Thanks for listening to Market Impact Insights. And thanks for the positive feedback that's already coming in for my new book, The Giving Edge. Through the compelling real-life stories of 37 remarkable humans who show a giving mindset brought every day gives back exponential returns in business and life, people are feeling inspired. They're feeling motivated on how they can give more of their time, their resources, their intelligence, and their support to others. Check it out wherever you can find books, and I look forward to hearing your feedback too. Now on to this week's podcast.
Welcome to another edition of Market Impact Insights, your podcast source for business leadership perspectives to help your business grow. Hear from experts in marketing, sales, business strategy, and more, with practical advice for business success. Make sure you won't miss the latest episodes by visiting marketimpactnow.com. Now, here's your host, Dan Albaum.
Welcome back to another amazing episode of Market Impact Insights. The theme of the conversation today is leadership from the ground up. How unique and how special and how amazing it is to really build something from scratch, to build a business, to build an agency. And what if you started that agency at age 19 and built that into a successful multi-million-dollar business that is delivering incredible value to clients, innovative marketing? We're going to get into all of that with Chantelle Little because she's lived that experience. She is the founder and CEO of Chantelle Little, a design and development agency that is helping B2B SaaS founders and marketers scale with conversion-focused web, brand, and product design. Under her leadership, she has scaled this agency focusing on B2B software brands across Canada and the US, and her dedication to vision and her team has made her recognized as an Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year finalist. She is all about a no-ego culture. Yeah, we're going to get into culture for sure. And the power of intergenerational cooperation, that fosters innovation. It fosters mentorship across a very diverse team. Let's get into it. Chantelle, welcome to Market Impact Insights.
Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate you having me today. I'm looking forward to it.
So you've had this just amazing run and growth as an entrepreneur. What originally sparked your passion to pursue a more entrepreneurial path?
Well, it's a great question. When I was in university, I had the opportunity to work at a health benefit company that was a small firm, and they didn't have an in-house marketing team. They were kind of doing it themselves and splitting that responsibility across a few different functions. And that summer, as a student in university, I had the opportunity to get my first taste in the realm of marketing. And it didn't take long, 4 weeks to be precise, before I thought, this is fun. And I think the two things that stood out to me is the power of storytelling. I really loved the storytelling part of marketing. And I think the other thing is that, I, through school, had built a little bit of this impression that marketing is bad or evil because you're trying to get people to buy things. But I realized that marketing is so much more than that. It's about helping connect solutions that solve pain for human beings, and helping them solve that pain. And so it brought more meaning and purpose to it. So I just really fell in love with marketing that summer. And so much so that I decided that I wanted to start my own little agency to help me get through school, because I was fascinated not just with the marketing part, but also the idea of venturing out on my own. And of course, hindsight's 2020. So now that I look back, I realize that entrepreneurial spirit was in me from early on as a kid. But it was just that summer where I really came face to face with the opportunity and decided I was going to take a leap.
Yeah. And how cool is it? Because we hear about so many stories of entrepreneurs that went through a corporate phase, right? Mm-hmm. And then they made the jump, and it may have seemed risky. People are saying, no, don't do that. Stay with the safety net, but they go outside of it. But how cool for you. You never even really had to go through that full corporate phase of a traditional career. You had a vision and you went for it at a fairly young age and were able to see that vision be realized. That's got to feel just incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, it is very rewarding because in many ways, Tiller has been my teacher. It's helped me learn how to become an adult. It's helped me learn how to grow. And there's pros and cons, right? When people ask me, would you recommend people start a company when they're so young? I definitely say, yeah, absolutely, yes, because it will shape you and grow you and mold you. And especially, I was in business school at the time. So, go to classes during the day. And then in the evenings and the weekends, you have this real life playground where you can apply what you're
Yes.
learning in school. So I think it helped me learn a lot more in school. But there are pros and cons because, of course, if you get some real world experience, be it corporate or not, you do know a little bit more. So it's a little bit, there were some things that some corporate experience could have helped me with a little bit earlier on, but you alluded in the intro to intergenerational teams. And I think I've, gained a lot of value from having those that have gone before me be part of my journey as either an advisor, as an employee, and leaning on their experiences has been really helpful too.
So when you reflect back on your journey,
Mm-hmm.
and you said that it was a great teacher, what's been some
Mm-hmm.
of the biggest personal learning you've taken from that? And have there been surprises for you along the way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so many lessons that I've learned. I think one that I come back to often is the concept that comfort kills more dreams than failure ever will. Um, And I think in my journey, I have experienced these pockets of comfort because you grow, you get comfortable with
Yes.
something, be it hiring or comfortable with this type of work or comfortable doing year end or comfortable, putting yourself out there at a networking event or comfortable with, a campaign that you want to launch that's maybe a little bolder than you're used to. And you become comfortable. You have pockets of comfort. But that comfort can really lead to, stagnation and plateauing. And so I've learned to crave discomfort. And discomfort does mean that sometimes I'm taking bigger risks and sometimes I'm failing a lot quicker. But I've learned to love that and crave that. So I think that has been a huge part of it. And I think that really comes back to who I am as an entrepreneur, who I am as a leader, because I've noticed that my own willingness to pursue discomfort has helped shape those on my team and help those on my team take bigger risks as well. So that's kind of one dimension of it. I've learned that it's not really about building the business. It's about me growing and building myself and falling in love with the process of growth more than the destination. Like if you can really love getting up and doing mundane things over and over and practicing those things and getting good at those things, and if you can really love doing the hard work behind the scenes that nobody sees, if you're willing to put in the reps and do the practice, you can really grow and you can really get good. But you have to be okay with consistency and the mundane.
Mhm.
It's not all glamorous, so that's part of it. The other thing that I have learned a lot about is, and this is a little bit more recent, but just that celebrating your wins is fuel for what's next. I can be pretty hard on myself, and I have very high expectations of myself, higher expectations of myself than I do for others. And so sometimes that has been very resourceful for me. But in other moments, I need to be reminded to celebrate, to slow down, to celebrate the progress, to celebrate the wins. So I've been working with an executive coach that's been helping me reframe that celebration as fuel for what's next. So those are a couple. I mean, I could go on, but those are a couple. And maybe, Dan, to your second question about surprises, I think the biggest surprise has been how many times my job has changed in the journey. Like, my job title has always been founder and CEO, but every 3 to 6 months, that actual role is shifting. So I would say that I've learned that I'm more comfortable as a founder than I am as a CEO. And I've had to invest time and energy into learning how to be a CEO. And I'm still on that journey. Like a CEO that can really scale a company is different than the CEO that can start one. And so as a founder, you want to be able to grow into that CEO that your company needs. So I think that surprised me a little bit, is just how often I would need to be able to level up and grow with the company, and how closely my own growth would be connected to how far the company can go.
And sometimes being that founder and that CEO, that can be a real lonely seat at times, especially if
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of uncertainty, change, and you mentioned getting the coach and finding sources of energy, right, to maybe help lift you, because if you're
Mm-hmm.
focusing and projecting as a leader to lift others, at some point you've got to refill your battery too, right? Have you
Yeah.
found that to be kind of one of those challenges along the way?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've been very fortunate to have family and friends who have been incredibly supportive of my entrepreneurial journey from day one. And so there's always been, a sense of support there. But it is hard as a founder, and as a CEO, because even though people seek to understand, they may not have ever been in that situation before, so may not be able to fully relate to the pressures that you face. So it can be lonely. And I, can think of moments or seasons where it felt really hard because you're dealing with a lot, and don't really have anyone to lean on to help you solve those problems. Or if you do, those people aren't necessarily super qualified to help advise. So it is challenging. As I mentioned, I have had two kind of periods in my journey where I've worked with an executive coach, and I'm currently working with one since last September. And he's just fantastic at helping me like level up and explore what I'm capable of. And he doesn't advise or consult per se, but through feedback, through asking great questions, through, prompting me to reflect, it definitely has helped me a lot mentally carry the weight and the stress of doing what I do, and helped me also grow in how I handle those pressures.
Yeah. And one of the things that's come up so many times in my conversations with senior leaders on the podcast, the hardest things they say is developing and sustaining a healthy culture. And I know you're a big
Mm.
advocate for this no ego culture, but
Hmm.
what has been really key for you in really being able to not only build initially, but then sustain a very healthy culture at your agency?
Hmm. Yeah, it's been a learning process for me, because at the very early beginnings at 19, I knew what the textbook answer of what culture is, right? Like, what is culture? And I could answer that
Uh-huh.
conceptually. But I think there's a big difference between understanding what it is and then creating something. And in the early days, I think that I underestimated the effort, the energy that it takes, the intention that it takes to build a healthy culture. Um, maybe more on the side of like thinking that you could set it and forget it, not recognizing that your culture is expressed in every interaction every day. So my perspective on culture has matured, kind of the school of hard knocks. It's matured through the years, and I'm still learning so much about it. But I think a couple of things is that I've learned that you need to have a really strong cultural system, and it needs to be defined and documented, but it can't be just something that hangs on a wall. It has to be embedded into your rituals, your habits, your practices. So we've had different iterations, as you can imagine, of our culture over the last number of years. And we recently just did a more significant update. And so the way that I kind of think of it is, it's like there's a cultural operating system, and we've got our values, what we believe, and what helps us make decisions. And then we actually articulate our culture in context of the standards that we have. So it's
Mm.
kind of values and then standards. And that describes how we behave and the standards that we're going to hold each other accountable to. And then we have to have the like how we know it's working. How are we going to measure if we are on target with our culture or not on target, and where growth is needed? And then of course the most important piece is really the people, the ones who bring the culture to life. So I have thought a lot about that. And, I didn't used to think before hiring, let's make sure we hire culture creators. But now I think about that all the time. Like, we need to find people who create culture, they don't consume it. And that's a really big thing for me is looking for people that are going to build and enhance the culture and bring, their unique perspectives and personalities and passions, all to the table to make this a better place where people can thrive. So I think those are the main things. I'm really big on culture being something that needs to be nurtured. And I love how you said that, because I would say it is the hardest part of the job, because you said it, but then you're nurturing it, you're protecting it, you're, having to make hard decisions to protect it. It's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, and I guess the analogy that I've always had in my head around the culture is the garden. And I think about the idea of planting and harvesting, and the idea of constantly, needing to feed in order for that garden really to flourish. And I think a lot of organizations I've seen where things fall down is that there's excitement and there's an aspiration to want the culture to be something, and we create a beautiful slide. Maybe we share it in a town hall, the meeting, but then if we're not constantly tending to and really closely monitoring and caring and feeding of that, then we can end up with some nasty surprises come harvest time, right? Because things just erode. Anyway, I've always felt there was that analogy, but it's all back to what you talked about, which is you've got to be intentional and put the effort in.
Yeah, I love that analogy. Actually, that's a great analogy. Yeah, my executive coach the other day was talking about the concept of barnacles growing and how quickly,
Yes.
like, part of it is learning how quickly to shave them off and get rid of them. Right? Like, it's a hard thing because things do grow, like weeds, barnacles, whatever it might
Yes.
be, and learning to care for that. So I love that.
Yeah.
That's great.
And so you're working with so many B2B software brands with Tiller Digital. And so you've got this perspective on what they are facing right now out in this really interesting, dynamic, fast moving market. What are some of the biggest challenges you're seeing when it comes to differentiating those brands and, more importantly, building trust with their buyers?
Yeah, I love how you said that, because the landscape that marketers are trying to thrive in right now is a really challenging landscape. And I know over the last number of months, the last 12 months, really, I've been at a number of conferences that are, B2B go-to-market leaders talking about how old playbooks aren't working and how everybody's in pursuit of this new playbook that's going to work. Everybody's looking for clarity on what's going to work in this changing landscape. I think one of the things that I think about quite a bit is that in this rapidly changing landscape where AI and technology and other factors have reduced the barrier to entry, there are more people launching solutions and products into the market. And so as a result, the marketplace is becoming more crowded. Even if you look at how the SaaS market, in the B2B market has matured over the last decade, like, you can see some of that evolution and just like how crowded the space is. So naturally, when the space is so crowded, differentiation is like you said, it's so key. And I think many B2B marketers really struggle to find their brand's unique voice and narrative. And in part because the market is so saturated, so it's hard to find something that's truly distinct. But I think the other challenge is that they are being asked to do more with fewer and fewer resources. So even if there might be something that they could lean into from a differentiation perspective, they're being asked to move faster and do more with less. So they often feel they don't have the time or the resource to really narrow in on those differentiators and then express them in their fullness. So I think that's hard. Maybe worth sharing it too is that in this like very AI heavy landscape that we're in, I see a lot of marketers trying to leverage AI, and rightly so, because we all have to figure out how to leverage it effectively. But the challenge with it is that if every marketer, if every brand manager, if every CMO can put inputs into AI and it solve these very important business problems for them, it kind of spits out a lot of the same, right? So it's even harder to differentiate. You have to be able to discern and assess what's coming out. Is that differentiated or not? Because, AI is kind of programmed to agree with us too. So yes, this is differentiated, but is it? Right?
Mhm.
So it's really challenging. So I think the thing that is interesting, or the thing that I'm really excited about, is that because of lower barrier to entry, because of more entrants in the market, because of AI, people's pressure to do less with more, I think people, B2B marketers, are coming back to like this focus on authenticity and humanization of the brands. And that ties nicely to the second part of your question around trust. Because AI is kind of reducing trust. It's increasing skepticism. Is this company real, or is this a company that was made overnight with Lovable? It's like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's like hard. So, yeah, I just really think that there are a lot of challenges with it, but I think the marketers that are leaning into authenticity, really finding their voice, trying to be more human and authentic, are helping to separate themselves from some of the companies that are less that way. So that's a helpful angle, at least that people are leaning into.
Yeah, when you were talking earlier, Chantelle, I wrote down sea of sameness. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the interesting effect of having access, of leveling the playing field, having access to all these wonderful AI tools. So if we're now in more of that sea of sameness, or that danger, or that risk of going there, ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
though, where do you see AI having the most significant impacts on marketing strategy and execution? Hopefully some they're really positive over time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what is exciting is that, with the mandate to do more with less, I think that marketing teams and leaders that figure out how to leverage AI effectively are going to gain a competitive advantage. Um, and I think that the focus, like at least, what I've observed in conversation and in conferences I've attended, and even personally in my own agency, is that we have to shift from just saving time to unlocking new value, and new insights and true leverage. So one thing that I think is kind of interesting is that AI is kind of forcing people to become better strategists and thinkers and directors. And we talk about this in design quite a bit, right? It used to be that the art director role was reserved for a select few, and you would work with other designers to bring the vision to life. But in the world of AI, there's an opportunity for every designer to function like an art director, and to build those strategic skills and those thinking skills, and direct AI to help take off some of the execution load. And so it's just a really interesting landscape, because that marketer who may have a really small team, if they could figure out how to unlock AI, they could potentially, have higher output and be able to execute on their vision a little bit more quickly without it necessarily having to translate to headcount. So I think that is an exciting opportunity. And I also think, like, there's been this, ongoing debate: is it better to be a specialist or a generalist, right?
Yeah.
I know early on in my career as a founder, I was reading books about generalists because I thought, well, I'm kind of a generalist. Like, is there a place in this world for me? Like, do I need to be a
Mhm.
specialist to add value? And in this world of AI, I think generalists are making a comeback in some ways. And I don't mean to suggest that we still don't need specialists, but in terms of marketing strategy and execution, some of the folks that are most effective in directing AI, either from a strategic perspective or an execution perspective, typically have that broader context and understanding that a generalist would have. And so, in many ways, they're better positioned to leverage AI in a really, really effective way. So, I just think that the opportunity is pretty significant. I think it's resulting in an entire workforce having to make an adjustment. So it's like a large upskilling event we're all going through, right? But for those that really are open minded to it, and find ways to leverage it, it's really increasing the possible impact quite quickly. It's actually quite fascinating to see. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. And, an often spoken statement I've been hearing when it comes to this whole area of fear of AI taking jobs is that it's not that AI itself is going to take your job. It's that someone who embraces and fully understands it has the potential to take your job if you aren't
Yes.
actually getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? Which is really
Mm-hmm.
learning and growing with it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it is, even as an agency, our focus, around like 12 months, 18 months ago, we weren't, asking people about their AI experience before we interview or in our interviews, right? But now that's a huge focus because I just think we need people that,
Yes.
none of us know everything about it, but it's more about the appetite to learn and the appetite to grow and leverage it in the right ways.
As a career marketer, there's been this eternal battle that I've just been witness to. And I
Mm.
want to get your perspective on this. And that is the question of balance of investment between brand and demand.
Hmm.
And it seems like these are two sometimes opposing forces, right? Or mutually exclusive. But at the end of the day, what should we really be measuring? And how do you see that existence of brand investment with the tactics around demand generation?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, you're right. It has been a hot debate, and I think that I don't think it will ever change. But as an agency, we think a lot about this because we work with customers on both the brand and demand side. And so I think over the last number of years, we've formulated a stronger perspective on it because of what we've seen and experienced. And I think the first thing that is worth noting is that I see them as an integrated system. So while they play, a role, an important role, they really are a system. And the way that I like to describe it is that they're fuel for one another, right? If you don't have a strong brand, demand performance is probably going to be low. And it's kind of a vice versa type thing, right? So I would say that it's important to see them as fuel for one another. And obviously practically, like in the B2B SaaS space that we serve, most of the CMOs, the VPs of marketing, and marketing leaders that we speak to are under huge pressure for demand.
Yeah.
That's like the thing, right? Sometimes it's like get 10x, results this year,
Mm-hmm.
like crazy, crazy big goals in improved performance. And so I think that the focus, like if you think about a marketer in an organization and what the investors are saying, the board of directors are saying, other C-suite people are saying, usually it's more demand centric. So I think the challenge marketers have is to build a case for brand as an important investment to help improve demand performance. Um, and the way that I like to think about it is that, at any given time, 95% of your market is not ready to buy. Only 5% is in market. So the benefit to investing in brand is that we're starting to build some mental availability with the 95% so that when they are in market, when they are within that 5% category, they think of your brand first. If we neglect the 95% and only focus on bottom of funnel, like hot leads ready to buy next week, that isn't a long-term strategy that is going to scale. So I think that's a really important piece, is like building the case for brand as a lever, a very important lever for fueling demand. And then I think practically speaking, Dan, there's a lot of research out there around where your percentage might fall. Like if we're talking about like what's the right balance, right? When you're in different stages of growth, brand and demand play different roles. So for example, really, really big companies with a lot of existing brand awareness, they often can lean more into brand style campaigns that are less conversion focused. So sometimes the larger the company, the more they can play with the brand play. Whereas an early stage company, it may not be quite as effective. Mm-hmm. So I think there's just different stages where different levels of investment are needed.
Yeah. And it just comes back to really knowing your market and knowing your customers, having a clear profile of who you're trying to reach, and having the context to better make intelligent decisions around where to spend, right? Sometimes it's just doing that roll up the sleeves foundational work that can lead to a better decision there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of like we like to think about it in terms of like we're very customer centric in our marketing approach. So anytime we're working with a customer and we have the opportunity to interview the customers, why did you choose this solution? Why are you staying with the solution? And look at competitor reviews. Like anytime you can get customer data or prospect data, it's a gold mine, right? Because within that feedback, it tells you about what's working well with your brand, what's not, and then it gives you the insights needed in order to actually make the changes that you need to make. So I very much agree that understanding the customer, having clear personas, understanding where they hang out and what type of messaging will resonate, what their pain is, how you're solving that pain. A lot of that is really the keys to making it successful.
Well, you're giving advice all the time to your clients. I'm going to flip things around, Chantelle, and ask you what the best piece of business advice is that you have ever received.
Oh, I've got so much good advice. Thankfully, because I need it. The one that I go back to probably most frequently is advice that my dad gave me almost a decade ago. And he said, you become what you tolerate. And that has stuck with me ever since then. It's a very useful, very resourceful piece of feedback. So that's probably the one that has stuck with me the longest.
And that actually is a nice bridge into a question around leadership and the role of leadership in really setting those parameters. I guess back to what we tolerate as leaders is what we will get, in terms of the outcomes. But what else do you think separates truly exceptional leadership from just good enough?
Yeah, I think it kind of connects to that concept of you become what you tolerate, because I think as a leader, when you're so busy, you've got so much on your plate and so much pressure, it can be quite tempting to tolerate certain things because, to not tolerate them means you have to deal with them head on. And that requires courage and bravery. It requires time and energy. Going back to your garden analogy earlier, right? It's like you have to deal with what's in the garden, right? You have to water it. You have to get rid of the weeds, those types of things. So I think, I think the difference between exceptional leadership and just good enough is that willingness to be brave, not just knowing what you need to do, but actually doing it. It's really easy to have a thought or an intention, but it takes a whole lot more to like deal with it consistently. And so I think like exceptional leaders go beyond intent or good ideas into action. And that action has a powerful ripple effect in your organization from a cultural perspective, from a growth perspective. So that's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah. And a recent conversation I was having with a leader was around this idea of the difference between kindness and being nice. And the idea that we can be nice, because a lot of people view those as being synonymous when actually there's a distinction. We can be nice, and that might mean that we're avoiding bringing up the hard conversation, the tough conversation in the spirit of improvement. Being kind may mean actually being intentional about having a tough conversation with someone in spirit of their development and growth that isn't easy and isn't always the thing we want to launch into. So even that distinction in terms of what we're going to deliver as a leader becomes really important, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've also recently had, we're on the same wavelength because I recently had a conversation with my executive coach about the same thing. So I
Mm-hmm.
love that distinction because it is easy to think they're synonymous. And I just think when you have the great responsibility of leadership and the responsibility of setting the standards, it takes a lot of intent and a lot of energy to make sure that if you say you tolerate excellence, you then have to back that with your behaviors, with the feedback, with the way you curate the culture, with the way you curate the team. And that's what leads to that vision of realizing excellence. So yeah, leadership is a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of, not so glamorous work at times, but there's something very fulfilling about being a steward of that and really taking that responsibility seriously.
So when you think about the future, what makes you optimistic?
Mm. That's such a great question, and there's a lot of things that kind of come to mind. Being in the space that I'm in, running an agency, working with B2B marketers, I'm feeling very optimistic about the future and what's possible. And I think some of that comes from the way that the market is shifting. I think with the rapid acceleration of AI, there's naturally some fear and apprehension that comes with that. But I also feel very optimistic about what opportunity is coming as a result of that. And I think, as an agency, we see so much opportunity, so much untapped opportunity, of things that we could be doing to better serve our clients, of unlock value we could deliver to clients, on ways that we could scale more effectively, all made possible by some of these shifts that are happening in the landscape. So I feel very optimistic about that. And I would be remiss if I didn't say I feel optimistic about the future because of the people that I get to work with every day and the team that we've built. Being in it together is everything. And so I feel really optimistic just looking around the office here today,
Uh-huh.
and excited about what we can build together.
I love that. Even in a time of all this fast moving, fast changing technology innovation, it still comes back to the human factor really being
Mm-hmm.
this just ever present source of optimism and positive energy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think we all need more of that, right? We need to be reminded of that at times because, yeah, we're all in it together and all learning together. And so I love that. Yeah.
So, do you have any other final advice for marketing leaders that are trying to create more positive impact and elevate the performance of their teams?
Hmm. Yeah, something I didn't touch on in this conversation is just, like I said, the marketing leaders we serve are under so much pressure. And one thing that I'm really passionate about is helping marketers speak with the executive teams, the board of directors in very like business centric ways. I think a lot of times these marketers aren't really well positioned. They're given a budget, and then afterwards, after they've been given a budget, they're given the goals and they don't match. It's like this is completely unreasonable.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to take the approach of working with the executive teams, be that a chief revenue officer, or sales lead, or whoever it might be, and just really trying to co-create and collaborate on the objectives and the strategy for achieving them. And marketing plays a key role in that, but there's other departments that are involved in that too. So I think any marketing leaders that are struggling to get buy-in from CFOs or struggling to balance unrealistic goals and expectations. I just really encourage like pipeline centric and revenue centric conversation to help you build a case for the resources that you do need in order to achieve those objectives.
Yeah, it's a credibility piece, isn't it? More
Yeah.
than anything else.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Chantelle, thanks again for coming and reminding all of us that leadership from the ground up really starts from within in terms of the
Mm.
behaviors and the intention to create the kind of lasting culture that will thrive. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Me too, Dan. Thank you so much again for having me. It was great chatting with you.
And a reminder, please continue to give the gift of feedback to help make this podcast even better. You can do that by going out and giving a rating and a review. It's so easy to do on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And as always, make sure to visit marketimpactnow.com for the latest in business leadership perspectives. So long until next time.